In this video, we're going to learn about HTML. You might notice that I'm on the Google page right now, but what you might not have noticed is that I've changed my button text to Mr. Matthews and is awesome. So it says Mr. Matthews is awesome. In this video, we'll teach you how to do that and a whole bunch more, so stay tuned. Visit learnstem.com.au for online STEM courses for kids and STEM teaching resources. Alright, so the first thing we really want to do is jump into Google Chrome or Firefox or something similar to that, a different web browser. More modern ones are better than older ones, so don't use Internet Explorer. We're going to jump up here into Google search for Notepad++. We'll go to Downloads here and we'll install Notepad++. Get the latest version if you can, and then you want to get the version that probably the installer version rather than the zip version, and I'm on Windows 64-bit. If you're on Windows 32-bit, which you probably won't be, you can grab that one, but by default most people should get this one. Going to click the installer and download this software. It's a pretty quick download. I'm going to run the installer, hit next, agree, install the software in its default location. We can create a desktop shortcut if we want to, but you don't necessarily have to do that. And then we're going to click finish. Alright, and so now what we've got is this text editor. So that's the first thing we're going to do, but just to go back and make sure I do tell you what we need to actually learn about the Google stuff. The unfortunate thing about this is that if I hit refresh, it disappears. So what I want to do is go into the code for this web page, and the way I do that is I right click anywhere on the screen in Chrome and I click inspect. Alright, and this opens up this panel on the side here. Most of this isn't really that interesting, and I can close off this bit down the bottom, but you'll see here there's a bunch of code, and the code starts with this bit that says doctype HTML. Now this is something that all HTML files start with. The next bit is the start of the HTML. So it has this little tag called HTML, and then down the bottom we've got another one that ends that. We'll talk more about tags later on. In the heading, or the head, sorry, we've got a bunch of code here as well, but we won't really get into that stuff today. For now, what we're going to really focus on is the body section. If we use this little tool here, this is the select an element on the page tool, so we can hover over different parts of the page and it will highlight them. I want to edit this particular button here, so I'm going to click here and it'll highlight the bit of code that is useful for this button. So you'll see I've got an input class, and it's got a class there that it's assigned from Google, and then it's got a value that says Google search. So I'm going to say hello on mine. And then you'll notice that the other button is right next to it. So I'm just going to go down here, and again it's next to it in the code. If I click down here, you'll see now I've got hello, but then I've also got I'm feeling lucky. So I'm going to write students in there. Right, so my buttons now say hello and students, and they'll still do the normal thing that Google does when you hit those buttons, but they just have different text on them. We'll try that one more time. You'll see down here it says I'm in Australia, but we can change that. So what I might change it to is something like the moon. So if I click here, I'll be able to find that bit of code, and again it says span, and it's got some class stuff there, but it says Australia, and I can go in here, double click, and change that to moon. Alright, so there we go. Now my Google page says the moon. And that's almost as hard as HTML gets. It's really about making things on the page look the way you want them to look and say the things you want them to say. So in this video we're going to continue on with a bit of that and get into Notepad++ and discover how all of this works. So I'm going to go back into Notepad++ now, and I'm going to close off this default thing here, and you see it opens up a new one. What I want to do instead is go save as, and I can save this anywhere on my computer, but I might go to my downloads folder really quickly, or my desktop actually. Let's do it in desktop. We'll do it here. I'm going to make a new folder by right clicking and going new folder, and I'm going to call this website. So now I've got a new folder called website. I'll go into here, and what I'm going to do is call this index.html. And you'll see it says all types here, but I can also go in here and change it to HTML. So I don't necessarily have to do this if I've called this index.html, but going here and selecting this is a good way to make sure that you've named it correctly. So mine says index now, and it's going to be in hypertext markup language, which is the way that we write HTML code. It's an abbreviation of hypertext markup language. So I'm going to hit save, and now I've got this file. Alright, so this is an empty file, and I'm going to start it off with that little bit that says exclamation doc type HTML. Alright, and what this does is it tells whatever's going to read this file that this isn't a HTML bit of code. Right? In here, I'm going to put HTML. And then whenever I open a tag, I also want to go a bit further down and I want to close that tag. So I've opened a HTML tag, and I can put things inside the tag to define how they work. But down here, I'm going to end my HTML. Right? And you'll see it draws a little link in Notepad++. Different text editors will handle this differently, but this is how Notepad++ does it. And the way that this works is if I minimize that, it'll hide a bunch of stuff. So that can be useful in different circumstances. Now the next thing I'm going to do really quickly is do a body section. Right, and again, I'm going to go down and close my body. Alright, it's a good idea whenever you open a tag to make the close to that tag, just so that you don't forget to do it. Because if you don't do it, it could cause issues later on in your code. So now I've got some really basic stuff here set up so I can start putting stuff onto a web page. I'm going to start really easily with just using a little bit of code here. I'm going to tab across once more. So to jump from level to level in here, I'm going to hit tab. And in this new level, I'm going to put in a heading. Now the way we do headings in our HTML is with this h1 tag. This is heading 1. Heading 1 is the biggest tag, and every other heading that we use, like h2, h3, h4, they get progressively smaller. So h1 is the biggest, and all the ones after that are smaller. So I'm going to go in here and end my h1. There's different ways that you can do this as well. So here on my h1 line, I might say, hello. Welcome to my web page. And I can either put this h1 tag at the bottom on the next line, or I can just chuck it on the end like this. And normally when I'm just using text, I'll just put them on the same line, because it makes it fairly easy to read through and see what's going on. If this gets particularly long, so if it doesn't fit on my page anymore, I might consider jumping it down there just so it's easier for me to edit later on. Now the next thing we're going to do is add in a little paragraph. So I'm going to add a little p tag, and I'm going to do an end p. And in here is where my text will go. Okay, so now I've got this little index.html file. And I'm going to hit save, so I can either hit this little save icon here, I can go file save, or I can hit Control S. And normally when I'm using HTML, I like to use Control S because it's a little bit quicker. So I'm going to hit Control S and save my code. Alright, so now what I want to do is see that code and see if it's actually looking the way I want it to look. So I'm going to jump back into my folders. I'm actually going to drag that from another window. So over here, I've got my desktop folder. On that, I've got my website. And in here, I've got my index file. So if you'll see here now, it's got this little Chrome symbol. If I double click on that, it's got the text from my website. And what I can do to make this process a little bit tidier is I can pin this to one side, and I'll pin my Chrome window to the other side, and there we go. I've got hello, welcome to my webpage, and here is where my text will go, and that's the code that I've got here to make that happen. You can line this up on your page however you want. Often I'll have my text editor on this side, and I'll put Chrome on the other side. But it really depends on what works for you. So that's the basics of HTML. Have a go, see if you can make something like this yourself. In the next video, we'll talk about how we can add some color and pictures and things to these HTML codes. Thanks for watching this video. We hope you learned something. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos like this. You can also get more STEM content and teaching resources at learnstem.com.au.